Our panel is focusing on the creative art and culture and the dialogue, global dialogue. Assistant Director of UNESCO, Lalla Ben-Barka, who in 2013, we had a conference that at Cape Verde in Praia, which invited several ministers of higher education, of finance, of culture and tourism, and labor, to look into this question of youth employment in Africa by looking at the creative industry. And this is what Dr. Ben-Barka Laila said from UNESCO. Africa is full of talent, and whether it is with entertainment, gastronomy, fashion, or health, the creative economy opens new pathways for development and economic diversification. At the same conference, we had Professor Dalmeda, who drew our attention on the importance of culture and the place of culture in development and in placing Africa also in the world. He says, quote, "Culture is the dimension whereby a society expresses its originality to the world. It is the bedrock and foundation for social organizations and the aspect that shapes society's style of ways of living." End of quote. And the Nobel Peace Laureate, the late Dr. Wangari Maathai said, "Culture is the DNA of any society, of a people. If you want to destroy a people, destroy the culture. But the culture also produces art, science, and it's through art and science and the dialogue between art and science that we can talk about creative economy innovations." So I don't want to take too much time because the important is more focusing on each one of you. I'm inviting you, each one of you, to speak about why the creative industry, your role in the creative industry, and how the creative industry generates actually employment for youth, and how we have to take it seriously within the continent, and how the continent and the African diaspora actually brand Africa through the creative industry, through culture. Thank you.
Merci, chers collègues. Comme elle l'a dit, je suis le secrétaire général de la Commission nationale ivoirienne pour l'UNESCO. Et elle a commencé par citer le sous-directeur de l'UNESCO, ce qui est une bonne chose. Vous le savez, l'UNESCO, la définition, c'est l'Organisation des Nations Unies pour l'éducation, la science et la culture. Et c'est une institution donc, des Nations Unies qui vise à promouvoir l'éducation, la culture, les sciences exactes, les sciences sociales, la communication et l'information. La culture et les arts occupent donc une place importante dans le mandat de cette institution. Et l'UNESCO trouve toujours des occasions d'ouvrir avec les pays membres des éventails et les partenaires de débats autour des questions fondamentales sur la situation de la culture. Le patrimoine constitue une source d'identité et de cohésion pour des communautés perturbées par l'accélération des changements et l'instabilité économique. Vous savez que l'UNESCO a été créée juste après la Deuxième Guerre mondiale, le 16 novembre 1945. Après les grands dégâts causés par la Deuxième Guerre mondiale, l'humanité s'est réunie pour créer cette institution et faire de la culture le fondement de la construction de la nouvelle société. Et les conventions culturelles de l'UNESCO constituent donc une plateforme mondiale unique pour la coopération internationale en établissant un dispositif de gouvernance culturelle complet. Et en Côte d'Ivoire, l'exemple le plus patent, c'est que vous voyez le groupe Magic System, le groupe Magic System, en partenariat, la Commission nationale, en partenariat avec le bureau UNESCO Abidjan, ont réussi à faire de ce groupe donc des ambassadeurs de la paix. Et aujourd'hui, ce groupe investit dans le milieu éducatif, ce qui fait un lien entre l'éducation et la culture et les arts. Et toutes les conventions édictées par l'UNESCO, que ce soit la convention sur la diversité culturelle de 2005, que ce soit la convention sur la sauvegarde du patrimoine mondial de 2003, visent à promouvoir les cultures et la diversité culturelle et visent à permettre au peuple de s'accepter mutuellement. Et en termes de création d'emplois, ces patrimoines, ces sites que l'UNESCO décrète comme patrimoine mondial sont des sites qui permettent de créer des emplois aussi. Quand vous prenez la ville de Grand Bassam ici en Côte d'Ivoire, qui est une ville historique décrétée par l'UNESCO comme patrimoine mondial, vous avez tout un tourisme qui est créé autour de la ville. Les plages sont protégées, les sites sont protégés, la ville historique est conservée et le tourisme est développé. Et il y a bien d'autres sites comme ça, comme le parc de la Comoué en Côte d'Ivoire ici, qui est déclaré patrimoine de l'UNESCO et qui permet aussi de créer le tourisme. Donc, pour dire que la culture permet de créer des emplois, effectivement, la culture, c'est un moyen de création d'emplois et l'UNESCO, en tout cas, s'efforce à préserver les éléments culturels africains. Encore, pour prendre l'exemple de la Côte d'Ivoire, on a des éléments qui sont inscrits au patrimoine immatériel, comme le buffet des Taguanans le buffet sont des trompes transvalières et il y a le balafon Djegele. Djegele, le balafon, donc dans le nord de la Côte d'Ivoire, tout comme dans le sud du Mali ou le sud du Burkina, qui sont inscrits au patrimoine mondial de l'UNESCO. Et là, on doit pouvoir créer autour de cet instrument toute une industrie touristique. C'est l'objectif. En inscrivant cet instrument au patrimoine mondial de l'UNESCO, immatériel, c'est d'amener la communauté, les chercheurs à s'investir, à faire des recherches sur cet instrument et à créer toute une industrie touristique autour de cet instrument. Et au niveau de la Commission nationale, nous avons des projets dans ce sens. Nous avons déjà il y a un festival qui a cours, le festival de Djegele, qui se déroule à Bunjali. Et on a encore d'autres festivals que nous comptons organiser pour amener la communauté elle-même à s'imprégner, à prendre en charge, à voir l'importance de cet instrument qui reste encore rural, le Djegele. Tout comme tout récemment, encore le Zaouli a été inscrit au patrimoine immatériel, sur la liste du patrimoine immatériel, le Zaouli de Boisflé. Et c'est aussi une danse qui va permettre de créer toute une industrie touristique dans cette région du centre de la Côte d'Ivoire pour permettre aux populations rurales qui ont cette danse comme pratique artistique, comme pratique coutumière, de créer toute une industrie autour. Donc voici ce que je peux dire déjà à partir de votre question concernant la culture et la création d'emplois. Je vous remercie.
Hi everyone, my name is Diouf. I'm from Senegal And I've built e-commerce, a fashion e-commerce called Tongoro, which means star in Sango, which is the Central African Republic national language where my mother comes from. I'd like to know if we can have an image so that I can show maybe a visual of what I do. Yes, no, yes. Anyway, I wanted to start this conference talking about identity, because we talk a lot about arts and culture and the role of art and culture in the development of Africa and the role of education. And I think identity is one of the most important currency over times, because it's the only thing that we own that doesn't fluctuate, that help us navigate the world and affirm ourselves in the world. And I think African identity is one of a kind. It's plural because Africa is one, but made of 54. And I think it's one of a kind mostly because it holds a special threat that from north to south and east to west, we always happen to find in one another. And I think some people like to bottle that identity because it's so hard for them to define in terms such as hospitality, worth, joy. But to me as a creative, I think it's a feeling that cannot be described but only lived and experienced through vessels of culture such as hearts. 2 years ago, I've launched a brand, an African fashion brand that I just talked about, but unfortunately I cannot show you. So I set Tongoro, my brand, to be the first 100% made in Africa online label, mirroring the e-commerce, the global e-commerce, fast fashion e-commerce business models. And the goal is to promote through visual narrative a new image of Africa to what I do. Fortunately, I cannot show you, so. So it was important for me to market this brand as Made in Africa and push the stamp of the Made in Africa, because I feel like there is this collective thought often associated to the quality of our goods, the quality of our production, which is sad, and I think it's a duty for my generation and other creative to make a change and push the conversation and just also invite other people to see that we're not this sad continent, third world place where, you know, only bad things occur, but we can also actually build tangible structures and build tangible business and train people and participate in the economy of the continent through the creative industry. So what I do is that over the past 2 years, I've searched for tailors, qualified people that already have skills, and I bring in one of my friends who attended Parsons School in New York, who studied design, to come in Dakar and train them for 3 months. Today, I employ 4 tailors full-time in-house, and I also outsource a part of my production 2 months during the year. And what I've learned through this journey is that when we, so this is what I do. And what I learned through this journey is that when you introduce yourself to anybody in Africa saying that you work in the creative field, it's hard to be taken seriously because people only see and think of fashion and art as a hobby. But I've been fortunate enough to study business, finance, and marketing, and those are the tools that help me building this brand and take it to a global level today. I don't know, I don't like to brag about this, but when we have celebrities endorsing the brand, it's good for us because it means that we're doing something that matters, that we're being seen, and that we're putting at the same level as international brand on the global scene. So to give you a little bit, to give you a number, I started Tongoro independently with a $10,000 capital, and within 18 months, I multiplied this number by 10, which I think is amazing to be able to do on soil and on the continent. I'm not even saying that for recognition or anything. It's just, for me, a way to show that there is economy that can be created out of arts, out of creativity. But we need sometimes help, push from our governments or from structure that are able to invest in a structure like mine. And also yesterday, I think we talk a lot about higher education all the time. Hire this and hire that, and it's amazing. I mean, I think I've been fortunate enough to beneficiate from, to be able to go to business school and learn marketing and finance, which actually helped my creative side to flourish. But I went back to Senegal from like 3 years ago now, and the problem that we're facing when it comes to unemployment of the youth on soil, it's not about the middle class. It's not touching mostly even the sub-middle class, if I can say. It touches the young people that are hustling on the street and selling cashews at the red lights, the young guy who's gonna come to wash your car window, and the young guy who's gonna come help you park your car outside that hotel. This is the youth that we actually need to train and transform and educate through different type of channels that the regular one or the classic one that we're thinking about. So I was listening to those ministers yesterday talking about the lack of people in scientific areas, which I think is very necessary, because it would be amazing to have engineers and people that can help us build more roads and more architects and all this kind of profile. But I think we need like an immediate solution, and I strongly believe that arts, culture, and the creative field is one we can actually invest in, promote, and push to actually turn and create employment for the people that are just having a hard time to do something with their lives and have a stable income on a daily basis. So my question is, how can we actually transform this traditional know-how into an industry? Who's gonna help set, the standards for African production, in my case, and who's actually gonna give solution, if not us? So it comes from entrepreneurships, it comes from people like me, and I believe my colleagues, that are not only operating on the continent but also abroad, because they build business that help changing the narrative of Africa's creativity and Africa talents. And we need to think of better solution than just the classic channels that we have, and the classic channels that we think that are the only solution that we can offer the youth. Again, I'm going to repeat myself. I think I was fortunate enough to have access to a higher education, as we call it, but there are other ways, and I think there are also ways that take less time for us to really change things overnight. So this year, I was lucky enough to have Beyonce wearing my designs, which really catapulted the brand to another level again. And it's nice because it helps building up the business, and demand is growing. But on a personal level, I think I would need help from people, maybe from the government or maybe institution, who believe that training can be a solution for the youth that is already here, that is willing to learn, and who has like a hand force that I can probably use to develop an industry that is non-existing at the moment. So that's it. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name's Corrine Jones. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm a fashion stylist and also a fashion blogger, and I'm based in London. I grew up in London, And I think with London being very multicultural, there's been a load of things that have inspired my journey. But in terms of higher education and following on from what Sarah was saying, with what I do now, after studying product design development for fashion, it was a good course and it taught me the foundations of what I'm doing now. But going on and setting up my business, it hasn't really, I've had to use other skills to set up my business. So skills like networking, talking to other people, knowing how to communicate with people, knowing how to communicate with people on an international level has been very important for myself. And it's led me to be able to collaborate with people in Copenhagen and also in Serbia, countries where I never even saw myself going. And being a black person in the industry as well, when you go into those countries, I think they're also very surprised and blown away when you have that person coming into their own environment and that's interesting and wants to help promote them as well. And I think it also helps them to be able to understand people from the African diaspora because they don't normally communicate with people in that way. They only have their own kind of people around them. And starting off, I had to create my own portfolio. My course didn't really have anything to do with fashion styling as much. So I had to find a way to put myself in there and create that platform for myself. So it took me bringing in my friends to do hair and makeup for myself and me sourcing outfits, creating the concept as well, and getting a photographer on board to get myself into the industry. And now I'm at a place where I can take on interns, train them and teach them the foundations of what I do, and also highlight how important it is to network and to be resourceful. And in higher education, they don't really talk to you about those things. They don't talk about how important it is to know how to communicate to people. And I had to learn that myself because I was the kind of person that would be in an environment and be on the outskirts. I might want to talk, but I didn't really understand the benefits of it. And they also don't talk to you about the fact that you have to keep on going. You have to be consistent with what you're doing. And all of these, they sound like small things, but for myself, I realized that through the consistency of always contacting people, putting yourself out there, sharing your work and your inspiration on social media, all of those things were what's helped me to be where I am today. And I now have one of my clients who, I don't know who might have watched the royal wedding, but he was the gentleman that but he arranged the song for the choir that performed, and he also performed with them. And he has me work with his own choir, and I bring in a team of interns to work on those jobs as well. And for me, it helps me to know that I have enough information to be able to share with these interns. And therefore, when they're doing their own work, they can share that information with everyone else as well.
Hi, I'm Franck Fanny. Just very curious, I'm here today as an artist. I came back to Ivory Coast 20 years ago. Had the opportunity to work with corporate companies like Coca-Cola, Celtel, Atlantic Telecom as a network specialist, participated to the big bang of the mobile industry in Africa. I lately created my own ventures like Owen, the company I used to create the first navigation system for countries without street names and street numbers. Today we're doing video production. We're one of the first providers local content for the local TV. We also work for Canal Plus. I'm also involved into the fashion industry. I work for the company called Come First, which is work with a company called Confertius from London. I met them when I was in Copenhagen. Okay, so these are my boys who work together. I'm also an internationally known photographer. Having quite brilliant career, I have to say. So, talking about creativity, first thing I want to say is that I was very lucky to do all these things over just 20 years because I'm an African. I don't think I would have the opportunity to explore all these in such a little space of time if I wasn't an African. Being in Africa helped me meet very influential people, very inspiring people, and also the scarcity of resources put creativity and imagination to the center of everything that we did. Individually, I met a lot of brilliant people here, and the reason why I'm here today is, as she said, it's about networking. Keep on being inspired, meeting new people, and see how I can add this to the rest of the things that I'll be doing, because I'm not going to stop here. So, about creativity, recently the owner of Alibaba said that most of the workforce will be replaced by machines, robots. The value for the future generation is going to be into creativity. This continent is the most creative continent I know. I've been places, and people have everything already. We don't just do things, and this was one of my great arguments when I was working with Coca-Cola, where they couldn't understand where I was coming from with my crazy ideas. But here, we make things work. Things don't work. Like if you need a new phone line, you just don't call the company and then they bring you a phone line. You have to go talk to the minister sometime. They will send you to the director, and then the director will tell you sorry, and then you get a line. Just not calling the phone number, and then somebody will give you a call line. So I had to organize a few things that needed a lot of creativity, a lot of imagination. And coming back to creativity, creativity is the next value for the future generation. This is where the value will be. It's not into doing things, it's inventing new ways of doing things, because this is the way things are going. Machines are taking over. And I believe this continent will be in the front line of this because we're used to that. This is how we live. This is the way we do things. We create, we reinvent, and we always adapt to get further. Things don't exist. We have to create them. So I'm happy to participate to this panel because I see people are interested into sharing their creativity, sharing how they managed to take an idea and bring it into a business. And this is mainly the reason why I'm here, share, networking, see what other people do, and add it to my curriculum. Maybe talking to her or her will help me make it better now that I joined the fashion industry. I don't know, so that's the reason what I'm here for. Thank you.
We operate in 4 countries. The United States, South Africa, Johannesburg is where we have our flagship office in Africa, Nigeria, and the UK. And we function as a 360 media company, which means that we produce original content, we publish editorial content on our websites, on social media. We have a music distribution service as well, which creates global exposure and distribution for African artists internationally as well, with partnerships with companies like Apple and Spotify. We produce a lot of creative services and events and experientials, activations for brands as well, such as Uber, Nike, Capital One, and so on and so forth. And then last, we have a robust e-commerce business where we sell merchandise that is distributed within the United States and around the world. And for us, the mission, as I mentioned to you, is very simple. It's connecting a global audience to African culture. And why I believe that that is critical, I always quote my Black Studies professor, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, which is that he who controls the images controls the self-esteem. And if we don't begin to see ourselves in our own creativity and our own capabilities, then we cannot value our own humanity and our own contributions. And we can't start to look for solutions to our own problems within ourselves, and we tend to look externally. And so why the power of the media and why the power of arts and culture in terms of global diasporic dialogues is critical is that we need to tell our own stories. We need to see that the things that make us who we are and the diversity that we have are not archaic, are not barbaric, are not backwards. These are just indigenous to our Africanness. One example I always like to use as a comparative is you look at the film industry, Hollywood film industry. It's about a $10 billion annual film industry. And significant films, particularly Marvel films, have a lot of mythology. A character like Thor, which is a god of thunder, is comparative to a Yoruba god named Shango. And when you look at Shango and you mention it to African youth, they look at you as if you are, you know, of a different world. Meanwhile, they're there watching Thor, you know, carry a mallet. And so the point is that we need to continue to validate our own contributions creatively. Nollywood, comparatively, earns about $1 billion a year, and it's the second largest employer in that country. And now, that is with very informal ways of content creation. These individuals are not necessarily trained at the highest level, which includes script writing, cinematography, distribution, intellectual property protection. So this creates a significant opportunity for African creatives, specifically in Nigeria. And so when you talk about how we create opportunities in the creative sector, you're talking about fashion, you're talking about fulfillment, inventory, content production, marketing of fashion, photography. Even in the publication that we have, we employ and hire hundreds of writers from around the continent who create editorial content with a localized voice for global distribution. Same with the music industry, producers, music directors, studio engineers. There's an entire ecosystem that can be built around the distribution and the creation of content that speak to an African population, but not just to an African population, but a global population. You know, I don't think one can speak enough about the impact that Black Panther has had in the film industry and how that has created visibility for many people of color around the world and validated the prior notion that an all-black cast or a very original black film cannot make money or isn't profitable in Africa. And so when we think about arts and culture, it is sort of a soft power that we have on the continent, and we are arguably the most diverse people with over 1 billion original stories to tell, a very vast and robust and deep history. And so we need to tell those stories, but more importantly, we also need to preserve that, which also creates another opportunity of resources and jobs. You know, in the Western world, you have institutions dedicated just to the preservation of culture, whether that is music hall of fames, whether that is art museums and institutions. There are many of our art and creativity that resides in foreign museums. But the argument would be, well, we want them back, which is valid, but where would we put them? And how do we preserve them? And what is the story, and how do we share our contributions with people in a digital and in a modern era? One other thing I'll also mention is, you know, speaking of arts and culture, one of the things that have become ubiquitous in the United States and around the world is this gig economy, where, you know, companies like WeWork provide an open space for people to work. And this organization has raised, you know, several hundreds of millions of dollars for people who tend to work in various industries but move around in an untraditional work format. And then I'd push back and say, well, Africans invented the gig economy. We are the most informal workforce around the world. And if we start to see ourselves beginning with art, beginning with the visuals, beginning with the images, beginning with the stories, then we can start to find solutions to our own problems that are indigenous to us without seeking external validation. So this is why I think arts and culture is very important.
very much for this very powerful and inspiring conversation, each one of you. Before I open to the audience, I want to make an observation that what each one of you is inviting us to think about, which we did not discuss really yesterday, was to look at beyond the formal educational system, to look at the other sides of education that are located within African cultural spaces, whether on the continent or in the diaspora, that actually brand Africa and can create spaces for optimizing employment opportunities and that are not articulated into the formal framework of understanding employment, how to create employment, how to reach out to policymakers to think of this other side of creativity as the potential for opening up opportunity in fashion, in music, in dance, and in tourism and hospitality industry. I would like us here, each one of you again, to come back to you to tell us how to reach out to the majority of African youth who have not benefited from formal Western form of schooling. For instance, there is example of reaching out to tailors, etc. How do you reach out, and how do you reach out to the majority of the youth to create a dialogue for this opportunity that you are speaking about, and how do you bring that conversation to the table with policymakers in different sectors of economy and the educational system? It will be nice if you can tell us a little bit if you have a space to be at the table with policymakers and to be in dialogue with the youth who are not here. What will you do?
Je voulais dire, ici, comme on l'a dit, en tant que secrétaire général de la Commission nationale ivoirienne pour l'UNESCO, nous allons nous attarder sur le rôle de l'UNESCO dans la promotion de l'art et de la culture. Comme vous le savez, il y a des instruments venant de l'UNESCO qui permettent aux artistes de vivre pleinement de leur art. Et j'ai évoqué tout à l'heure des conventions. Je vais revenir encore sur ces conventions. Et le rôle de l'UNESCO, c'est d'amener le gouvernement à ratifier ces conventions qui permettent aux artistes de vivre pleinement de leur art et donc d'encourager aussi la création artistique. Quand nous prenons la convention 2003, convention pour la sauvegarde du patrimoine culturel immatériel, la déclaration sur la convention sur la diversité culturelle, mais la convention la plus importante et qui fait vraiment une belle place aux artistes, c'est la convention sur la protection et la promotion de la diversité culturelle, la convention de 2005. Une autre convention encore qui concerne les mesures à prendre pour interdire et empêcher l'importation, l'exportation et le transfert de propriétés illicites des biens culturels, la convention de 1970. Et donc toutes ces conventions permettent, avec l'UNESCO, encourage le gouvernement à les ratifier afin de permettre aux artistes de vivre de leur art. La convention de 2005, par exemple, est un instrument donc qui permet de connaître la nature spécifique des services et des biens culturels de par leur dimension à la fois culturelle et économique, pour exploiter au maximum ce potentiel au profit du développement humain durable. L'un des principaux objectifs est de créer un environnement propice dans lequel les artistes, les professionnels de la culture, les prestations, ou les praticiens et les citoyens du monde puissent créer, produire, distribuer, diffuser et utiliser des biens, services et activités culturelles très divers. Pour parvenir à ce but, donc, la Convention appelle le gouvernement à mettre en place des politiques qui favorisent la créativité, qui facilite l'ouverture des marchés nationaux et internationaux aux créateurs et fasse en sorte que les œuvres d'art soient accessibles au grand public. Et la Convention encourage également la coopération Sud-Sud et Nord-Sud. Et vous savez, il y a un fonds qui est mis en place dans le cadre de cette convention, le Fonds international pour la diversité culturelle. Et dans le cadre de ce fonds, des jeunes talents sont révélés souvent. L'appel est lancé sur les sites de l'UNESCO et dans les commissions nationales, puisque chaque pays a une commission nationale. Et nous recueillons les demandes des jeunes artistes et nous les proposons au siège de Paris, qui souvent sélectionnent des jeunes talents qu'on essaie de financer pour leur permettre de créer, de s'épanouir et de vivre leur art. Et donc, c'est vraiment ce que je voulais rappeler pour dire que l'UNESCO travaille avec les pays membres de sorte à permettre aux artistes de vivre pleinement de leur art, parce que la diversité culturelle est quelque chose que l'UNESCO recherche. De sorte que, à ce que les jeunes soient autonomes eux-mêmes, qu'ils puissent se prendre en charge. Et surtout, l'idée, c'est qu'il faut réussir à créer un monde de paix. Donc, à mettre tout le monde au travail pour éviter l'oisivité et donc que les jeunes soient utilisés à d'autres fins que à des fins donc, de paix.
In my case, I think it will be interesting to propose real-life solution adapted to what the market is right now. If I had the opportunity to sit at a table, as you said, with deciders in my country, I will offer them maybe a deal, a partnership, something that could benefit both businesses, but also the people that we want to employ to develop these businesses. I know a couple of other creatives in Senegal who are doing the same thing as me. Everybody has their own visual stories, their own narrative, and their own market, because we're not all selling the same thing, but the core of the business is tailoring, manufacturing, producing garments, and setting up, why not, a production facility that could not only help this business be profitable in the long run, but why not, from these businesses, having people that we can train continuously, and why not through a school or a program that we can develop aside at the same time, so that everybody's benefiting from that system. I think that could be one of the solutions. I cannot think of something else right now, but really I think we just need to try to craft and create solutions that fit the market and what's really happening right now, and also to find effective solutions.
I would say to bring the youth onto the job, whatever you're doing, especially in creating visual arts. Reality is a very big thing for youth right now. You've got so many reality TV shows, you've got social media showing you what's going on right now. And I know that from when I also share my work on social media and I'm sharing it live, there's a lot more interaction. So I feel that if they can experience it and see you at work, that can also inspire them and inform them, and they can take that away and use that information for themselves. And things like exchange programs could be something that you could consider, because it also helps to go into a different environment that you're not used to and learn from that environment and come back more inspired. So now when I go back to London, based on this conference, I'm thinking about how can I be a bigger impact to graduate designers and emerging stylists, those who want to get into that field. And so it's all about learning and connecting with each other. And also to invest in resources, invest in books. The internet has lots of information, but I think they need guidance on where to go. And when I was studying, I wasn't taught anything about any black designers, black stylists. So I don't really have anyone really to look up to at the time when I started this journey, but a lot of them are popping up now, and a lot of them are in prominent positions. And you've got Virgil Abloh, who's now working at Louis Vuitton, and he's also done creative direction for Kanye West as well. And you've got Edward Enninful as well, who's the editor-in-chief at Vogue. And for me, I got to meet him at a magazine signing, and for me, that experience alone was exciting. And I went home thinking about what can I do to kind of get to that sort of level. So I think those are things that can be considered.
First of all, I don't think I'd sit at any policy maker table. I forgot to mention that in those 20 years, I was also a government official for 2 years. I resigned. Reason is, why would I believe in somebody that makes policies on education when his own kids are schooling abroad? Why would I sit and talk policies with this guy? I mean, what for? Why would I sit and talk about education with somebody that has his kids educated elsewhere? Or talk about health with somebody that is a policymaker but gets his family cured in a different system than where I live? So to me, it's a waste of time. And like I said before, we have a lot of things to do around here. So I would encourage people to get together. The work that he's doing is great because it emphasizes on the people that make the difference. Their work is great because they emphasize on the people that are actually doing things, not just talking, doing things and taking it to a different level, like she did with her company, like she's doing, and like he's also doing. So, policymaker is, yeah, it's a nice thing if you want to waste time talking, but I really don't believe into that. We were able to do the GPS. I'm coming back to the GPS. We were able to do it. None of us actually studied cartography or anything. We just went on the internet, started looking for information, and we came up with a solution. It was very simple, actually, because we were stuck in our mind to the fact that the GPS was a browser for street names and street numbers. African street names and street numbers. So we were stuck because we were thinking with a foreign thinking. But he came to our Africanity. Even though we don't have street names and street numbers, we go places on time. We go to our meetings on time, even without street names and street numbers. So it was very easy to understand that if we start thinking as Africans, we'll be able to find a solution and understand that the GPS is not a browser for street names and street numbers, but a GPS is a navigation system. It works with planes, no street names, no street numbers, boats, no street names and street numbers on the sea. So it understands language of navigation. Africans have their own language of navigation, which is based on à côté de, next to, next to, next to. So if you make a database of all the à côté de and link them together, you have a navigation system. And when you have a navigation system, you have a navigation language with all the à côté de. So we made a database of à côté de, à côté de. English call it point of interest. When we made the database of all the points of interest and linked them together, we were able to have a navigation map, turn-by-turn map of the first African city to be able to be driven inside, with going from à côté de to à côté de. Exactly. This is how we get out of this, because we have this colonial mentality thinking that we cannot get to this place because, oh, there's no street names, there's no street numbers, we can't do it. It's not true. He gave the example of Bollywood. People with low education, capable of taking their thing and taking it to the second most productive industry in the world with low education. So higher education and policymakers, please step aside. Other thing, check out India. They became the first into computer programming and everything. Do you really think they did it by taking all the kids through long curriculum that we do, like we do? No. They just built tents, put computers inside and start teaching the kids straight away. You know how to read? You know how to count? We'll teach you how to code. Today they're first in coding. See? So it's not about policy making. It's about knowing the value of what's around us. And this is why this work is very important, because there's a lot of very influential people in my life. One of them is actually sitting in this room, Billy Bay over there, that I started working. When I started, he was my boss, and he was a very, very, very big influence in my life, because I wanted to be like him. I wanted to look like him. So I pushed the things to the limit, because this is, if Bill did it, I can do it. That was one of my goals. You know, so it's very important that those kids get to know who's actually doing what outside the system, because the system ain't doing nothing. They need to know who we are, what we do, how we got there, and organize around those real facts, those real solutions, so we can collaborate, we can create this force, share our experiences, and help them get there. And this is the platform that he was talking about. And this is those people that we should put. They should be the policy makers, not the governments. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, you've pretty much said it all. No, seriously, I think that the most important thing is, you know, we go back to culture, and which are a group of customs and norms and, you know, the way people operate and do things. You look at Kenya and the success that M-Pesa has had there, and part of the reason it was so successful was, one, it was priced for the market, right? And, you know, the way that Kenyans use mobile banking the United States is just catching up. They're just starting to understand and implement mobile banking. And so the thing that's really important is that the platform understood the way commerce worked within the country. One of the things that I've also thought that's very fascinating, and also I thought that there was a professor yesterday from which university who had mentioned inter-country scholarships, which I think was really important, because you know, we don't trade enough within the continent, and there's so much knowledge share that can take place just within the continent alone. But one of the things that I've always thought was so fascinating is that when you look at the way information has been passed down in African culture, no matter where you are on the continent, a lot of it has been orally. And we never really quite use oral communication as a way for knowledge transfer and information share. And so, you know, to policymakers, if you happen to be at that table or not, I would say, you know, to what you said, is study the way people communicate, study the customs and the norms. You know, we talk a lot about higher education, but the truth of the matter is, you know, we're saying the youth is about 200 million now, and it's going to be, you know, the largest unemployed and largest youth population in the world. Not everyone's going to have a white-collar job. And so how are policymakers, how are they implementing opportunities to train and prepare people for vocational and entrepreneurial roles? The bridges will need to be fixed. Plumbing will need to be, you know, services will need to be applied. Mechanics, construction workers. You know, we tend to look at these, you know, higher educational institutions creating these jobs that might not serve and will not serve the population growth that we're seeing. So I would say, you know, how do we create training opportunities that reflects the culture of the people? Whether that is orally, whether that is leveraging social media, you know, you can go on YouTube today and learn how to become, you know, a symphony composer. And, you know, you can go on YouTube and learn anything. And so where, you know, our countries and governments investing in video training courses so that people can learn how to do things if the schools are failing, right? If the formal institutions that we know aren't teaching our children, so let's find a different format. Right? Take the individuals who are capable of doing these things, provide them some, you know, some capital to go and train on YouTube and share that. You know, YouTube was instrumental in implementing a very different version of its platform in India. I think it's called YouTube Go or something like that, which took a very highly compressed version of data transfer from phone to phone as opposed to leveraging cellular data because of the data limitations. And that was a solution that helped in sharing content. You know, we all know that we receive more information from WhatsApp than websites these days. I don't know where my parents get all of those videos and that they send me on WhatsApp, but but seriously, like it's a real way to share information. And so we need to, again, look at the way people are sharing information now and then invest in those, because ultimately the result is people have the tools that they need to improve their livelihood.
I know there are some colleagues in the audience who would like to contribute, artists and yes, Kwesi?
So I would want to share perspective as a writer and an author of several works, also as a ghost writer of a number of books. Abiola was talking about the oral history that we've inherited. So I've taken it upon myself to make sure that I document as much as possible and preserve for the next generation. So that's what I've been doing for the past 10 years or so on the quiet. And it is an imperative that we try to document something. It is. It is, because the next thing we are looking at information. And I would want to really encourage all of us, if it's even journal keeping, if it is trying to have a family history written in one way or the other, if it is talking to older folks. And my friends are very old. In fact, one of them we buried last week was 95 years old. But this was a man who has written the laws of many African countries and Commonwealth countries. And we became friends, mentored me, wrote his biography. And when he died, everybody was saying, Kwesi, thank you for writing about this man for Ghana. So for me, it is a calling. And I do it every day. But I can't do it alone. I set up an organization to do that. Cultural and social narrative, historical narratives, to do that. No funding organization is interested in even giving, but I don't care. Because it is important that we document and preserve for the next generation. So I just challenge, if you have old people in your families, even if just 5 pages of something, get it documented. That's all I would want to say for now. Thank you.
Merci, c'est pour une simple contribution. Parce que quand je regarde l'image qui est là, Madame est habillée en basin. Et quand nous parlons de basin, on parle du Mali. Or, le Mali ne produit pas le basin. C'est simplement un tissu qui était utilisé dans le temps pour faire des rideaux. Depuis que les femmes se sont intéressées, nos artistes, aujourd'hui, on parle dans le monde entier du basin. Et les compétences sont transmises de mère en fille. Pas dans le système formel. Donc, aujourd'hui, comme elle le dit, il y a de la valeur africaine. Et je tiens à remercier tous les artistes qui sont là. Parce que ça, c'est la connaissance intrinsèque de l'Africain qui a donné de la valeur à ce tissu. Et quand tout le monde associe un pays à un tissu alors que le pays ne produit pas le tissu, c'est simplement la culture qu'on a mis une touche sur ce tissu-là. C'est ce que j'avais à dire. Je vous remercie.
I have just two quick questions. One is, I'm a bit skeptical, and I would like to have your response, particularly colleague in Sheds, who you seem to suggest that we do not really need to focus too much on policy. The policy community, we must just discard them. And I'm approaching this from the foreign policy perspective, because, your colleague next, Oke, actually, mentioned this whole idea of soft power, which is in the foreign policy arena. And we are all, as Africans, before Nollywood, we are all inclined towards Hollywood. And it's been promoted by State Department, right. Their foreign policy. So if you say we discard policy, particularly foreign policy, you're actually saying that we should change ourselves. I will want to get perhaps your response on what we can actually do to get foreign policy support for the kind of work you do as artists, as promotion of Ghana, Nigeria, Côte d'Ivoire, and so forth. The second question is actually relates to the whole idea of commercialization of cultures. And I also want to get your perspective, the creative industries. And I have in mind the case of fabrics in the West Africa region that were traditionally produced here, but you find now that they are being produced in Guangzhou or in Shanghai. In very fast, very commercialized way when they were artistic productions. What are your perspectives on those two questions? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Rutert. Abiola, I should talk to you about my mom's WhatsApp obsession and sending us too much pictures, and I can't get her to understand the data that she uses up sending us so many pictures on WhatsApp. But my question is about identity politics. And as you know, in the US, we're sort of going through a difficult period where there's sort of this new tribalism that's sort of happening in the United States. And Francis Fukuyama, the researcher, just put out a new book called Against Identity Politics, and argues that it's sort of eroding the American democracy, the way that it's being managed. So my question to you is, I'm for embracing identity, and I see the education institutions and artists as playing an important role in promoting identity, but in a positive way. So, and even you think Côte d'Ivoire, identity became a flashpoint in the conflict here. So my question is, what do you see a responsibility that you have in promoting identity that's inclusive and embracing in a positive way in terms of promoting democracy and respect for other individuals and cultures in Africa? Thank you.
My question is, because as I mentioned yesterday also, it is an issue of economy of scale. All of you are doing great work hiring people, but we have a continent of 1.3 billion people, most of whom are youth under 25 and unemployed. So we need to find a way to make your kind of companies that much larger so that you can hire a lot more people, provide employment opportunities. And that is why the issue of higher education is so important. Let's take the example of the garment industry. The panelist from Senegal was talking about. The Bangladesh did something similar, and they made it a multi-billion-dollar company, garment industry in Bangladesh. The same thing in India. Somebody mentioned about the coding system. Okay, they had the call center industry in India. Okay, multi-billion-dollar industry as well. So those are the sort of things we need to do in Africa. Create the next Steve Jobs, okay? The next Bill Gates, who can create big multinational companies in Africa, hiring hundreds of thousands of people, high-paying jobs. And the way to do that is through higher education. So it's excellence in science and technology. I think what all your stories are leading me to, again, going back to the issue of the coding in India, yes, they learn how to code, maybe not necessarily through formal higher education system, but majority of the programmers in India, I think, are in Silicon Valley. That's where the value addition is done. And that's why Apple was invented in the United States and not in India. Okay, so we need this high level value addition to the curriculum. So I think all of this, based on what I'm hearing from you, what is really critical, and it's consistent with what was talked about yesterday, is about curriculum design. How do we modify our curriculum in higher education so that we can produce the next Bill Gates, the next Steve Jobs, and so on? A curriculum that emphasizes critical thinking, a curriculum that emphasizes innovation, business abilities, teamwork. The panelist from UK mentioned about that. Learning networking was very critical to her, and she didn't learn that in school. So all of those things are extremely important. We have to have a curriculum that provides access, okay, because we have millions and millions of youth who are not provided education at all, talk less of quality education. So access is extremely important. Also impact, okay, and responsibilities. When you train those people, they have to be responsible to try to solve the problems of their local communities and the global. So problems in the continent of Africa, for example, they're related to energy, to food security, health issues. Okay, so we need a curriculum that can help us do all of these things. But I think all of your stories are leading me to this idea. Okay, higher education is about changing the curriculum so that we can produce the next versions of yourselves, but at much, much higher level, so we can produce jobs that can take care of our huge unemployment youth population. Thank you so very much.
I'd like to, I think, support what my colleague just said about the role of higher education in the creative industries, or in probably massification of the creative industries. I think the individual successes are very important, and they highlight the creativity that exists in Africa. But at the end of the day, we would want many millions of the creatives to be able to have platforms and excellent training to the person. You mentioned that you called on, Sarah, to a friend who studied at Parsons in New York. We want the Parsons of Africa. You know, without the policymakers, my friend, Parsons of Africa will not exist. But we want those higher education institutions. It's a challenge to African higher education to create ecosystems where creativity and artists can flourish, and at the highest standards possible in comparison to what's happening in the rest of the world. So I think both higher education have a role to play in scaling up. You know, creativity has always been there. Artisans create beautiful, wonderful things. But there are expectations of certain standard to go international. There are expectations of being able to learn not only your trade, but also all those peripheral skills that you need to propulse a business forward. You can't necessarily teach a creative singer how to craft the song of tomorrow or the biggest song else, out there, but you can provide that talented singer with natural talents all the best training possible in order to be out there and to contribute to the economy of his or her country through that training. And that training requires, I think, further training than just a high school education. It requires business training. It requires being able maybe to learn other languages, maybe creating syncretic programs that capture all of that is one challenge that higher education needs to meet in Africa. But again, using also the successes and the artists to come into higher education institutions in order to inspire the next generation of creatives. Thank you.
No, this is great. I'm going to try to keep it brief. One, for the record, I'm not an absolutist, so I don't think that it's either or. I think it's a symbiosis. There has to be some balance of, higher education and higher institutions that support the creative class, right? Because everyone is not, it's not just the singer who creates the economy of music. Right? It's the ecosystem that supports that individual. Whether it's your lawyers who protect the intellectual property, they have to learn that in a school setting. I think what I hear that some of the panelists are advocating is that to adjust the curriculum to reflect the habits of learning domestically. I think that is the key, at least from my perspective. It is not to do away with the higher institutions. That in my opinion, would just be ludicrous. But I'm trying to achieve as Africans. A gentleman earlier mentioned something that had me thinking, and this kind of responds also to the issue of identity and inclusion. If you bought champagne from Burkina Faso and you tried to sell it to a gentleman in London or a gentleman in New York, they wouldn't drink it. Because champagne, the validity or the essence of champagne has to come from Champagne, France. And champagne, they sell about 300 million bottles a year of champagne. And that creates significant economic value for France. And why that is important is that France has, and the region of Champagne, have made it critical that in the branding and in the promotion of this sparkling wine, which is no different than cava or prosecco, the only thing that makes champagne different is where it is, where the grapes are grown. And so it's very important that in the things that we produce, whether it's Ankara, whether it's our shoes, whether it's our music, that it is not that we don't want to make it inclusive, but we have to own the intellectual property, because that is what creates economy and that is what creates economic value for our people. So it is important to be inclusive, but to own the intellectual property similar to champagne. And in the terms of policy and propaganda, I think that it is absolutely important. You know, you'd be hard pressed to find a Hollywood film where an American soldier isn't putting his everything on the line to protect his country. And yet when you watch an Hollywood film, the first thing you see is police officers running in the opposite direction whenever there's a threat. And this does something very dangerous to the psyche of the African, which is that he or she does not have the integrity and the dedication and commitment to the humanity of his or her brother to do that. Young kids will see firefighters in the United States, in series, running into burning buildings. There's this narrative of bravery. There's this narrative of country first and humanity first. And I think that the arts have a very important role to play with the way Africans see themselves, whether it's seeing themselves in a future, imagining themselves as creatives of a future for themselves, or being able to die for country and for man and for honor and the nationalism that we see and we enjoy that Hollywood promotes. So I think as a matter of policy, that government should focus on protecting and preserving and pushing a narrative that there is some level of supremacy to African nations around the world through the arts and culture. So that's how I'd respond. Thank you.
Basically, I think you said it all. It's not about being against policymakers or thinking that we can do this way or either way. I mean, it's the mix of all this that can make it happen. But all I know is that most of the influential people that you spoke about when you're talking about Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, he didn't spend that much time in school, you know? He was busy doing his thing. You know, and he became what he became and started working with policymakers to teach them how you do it for a larger amount of people. But they had to focus first on what their dreams were and gather the people around to help them get there. So I believe it's a mix of everything. It's not a question of we start there, we didn't start there. Like I said, creativity is all around the place here. It's everywhere on this continent. The way to, the very diverse ways to make it happen, to bring it to more and more people, more and more youth. And I don't want to use the example of Bill Gates or any other people. He was in a different environment with different set of tools, different sets of policies and everything. If he wanted to go to school, he could go to school. It's different here. Even if you want to, you can't. Because there's a lot of barriers that we have here intrinsically that we cannot overcome, whether by will or even with money. Sometimes you can't do anything. So, yes, coming back to what he said is that we need to reinvent ourselves. The truth is we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to requalify what we call creativity. We need to requalify what we call branding. We need to requalify all those things, take ownership of that things, and bring the curriculum that will come after that to express it, not only make the ownership happen in our continent, but also to the other people that will see what we're doing, that we have full ownership of what we're doing there. So, yes, policymakers can help into that, but I'm here as an artist. I'm here as a creative, so I see it from my perspective. My job is to get there. My job is to succeed internationally, show those kids that live around me that it's possible. That I was in Abidjan and I had Google coming to visit me to tell me that I should make my thing free. You know my answer. Okay? I was sitting in Abidjan and I was able to get NAFTEC coming to see me and sign a deal with me. This is happening. This is possible. We don't need to be other people. We have ownership of something here. There's something happening here. She does it through a website. She does it too in London. We can do it at a larger level like he's trying to do on this platform. It's about taking ownership. And like I said, we all have a role to play. My job as a creative is to show the people around me that we can make it, not only in art, but in every direction that we decide to put our head onto. If the politics and the lawmakers help and take value into that, we're happy. But we're just not going to wait for them to think and create the future that we want for ourselves.
Just in terms of like global communication and educating those outside of the diaspora who we are and what we do, and all of the things that have originated from Africa, from the African diaspora. There's so much. It's such a rich culture, and industry-wise, and I think a lot of other cultures are not, or industries are not really aware of it because, for many different reasons. But I think as well, educating the youth and also finding ways, especially via the internet, to showcase what we've done before and what we're about, how we work as well. I think when people are able to understand you and learn to be able to connect with you, that's when it's easier to get out there.
So I'm going to finish quickly responding to Laura's question about identity, because I actually started with this. So I was saying that African identity is really one of a kind because, as I said, we're one made of 54, and we have this common thing that when I go to Morocco, I feel home. When I go to Uganda, I feel home. When I'm in Abidjan, I feel home. And when I'm in Dakar, I feel home. And when I meet an African in New York and we connect instantly, there's something that just links us to each other. And there's an instant dialogue that we don't even have to have because we're African and we share a common story. And I think because we share that common story, for the little girl who is, I don't know, in Ethiopia, who doesn't have a role model, who's never has seen an example of a success story, she doesn't even dream of becoming a business owner because she's in a small village or remote village without electricity, and I'm giving you like a very basic example. Thanks to internet, social media, and the fact that Africa is one of the first consumer in mobile communication today, she has access to me. She can find out about Tongoro, she can find out about story, and I think representation matters because of that. It gives hope, and hope is the beginning of everything. And to reply to the lady in pink, and I'm joining Abiola on this topic, I think we need a balance, obviously, but I also think we need to start on the ground, like we need to start with the groundwork. It's nice to talk, but when we talk too much, we actually don't do anything. And at some point, I was in Paris, started a brand, and I was living there, so I was traveling back and forth because the delivering system, like the postal service in Senegal, is not that effective. So to ship the merchandise globally, I had to be in Paris and dispatch the orders coming. And at some point when DHL 2 years ago launched the e-commerce rate, for me it was fantastic because I could actually be on soil and start the groundwork with the tailors. And we can always make plan and think about, we need higher education because I think one doesn't go without the other. I couldn't afford being a creative and living from this business if I didn't go to business school, if I didn't study finance or marketing. It wouldn't be possible. But I think also doing things on a daily basis and contributing to growth and working directly with the people, because any business and any growth is based on human interaction and human contact. So they see what I do, and for example, today, I'm in Abidjan for 2 days. I don't have a managing director or something because I have to do everything myself, but my tailor-in-chief is able to go to DHL or call them to come pick up the orders that we received this morning because they've seen me doing this every day, and at some point I've been training him just to interact with people from companies. So there is also a possibility for him to evolve in the company within the next year or 2 years. And I just think we need more action and less talk, and that's actually the only thing that I was trying to promote with my speech. That's it. Thank you.
Merci. Je voudrais dire que nous encourageons les artistes donc à initier des projets pour former la jeunesse, pour les amener à se prendre en charge. Mais en même temps aussi, il faut dire que le décideur politique a sa place, parce que tout à l'heure, elle parlait d'aller à DHL, elle est artiste, mais pour réguler, pour qu'il y ait une connexion entre DHL et elle, il faut bien qu'il y ait des politiques qui gèrent tout cela. Donc le politique a forcément sa place auprès de l'artiste, et vous devez pouvoir accepter ça. C'est vrai, la question de l'identité, c'est une utilisation perverse de l'identité culturelle qui aboutit à des conflits. Sinon, nous pouvons nous enrichir de nos diversités. C'est-à-dire que je suis différent de vous, et c'est d'ailleurs pour m'enrichir, parce que j'apprends de vous et vous apprenez de moi. Voilà, c'est ce qui fait l'UNESCO. Et c'est pour cela qu'à l'UNESCO, au siège de Paris, vous allez voir, tous les pays ont une seule voix. Que ce soit un pays de 500 000 habitants, ou de 2 habitants, ou un pays de 2 milliards d'habitants, vous avez la même voix pour le même projet. Quand il y a un sujet qui est posé, vous votez à égalité. Il n'y a pas un qui a plus de voix que l'autre. Donc, peut-être que vous pouvez avoir des moyens, vous cotisez plus, mais vous avez les mêmes nombres de voix, une seule voix à l'UNESCO, et c'est comme ça. Donc, nous faisons la promotion de l'égalité entre les races, entre les ethnies, entre les individus, et nous faisons la promotion de la diversité culturelle. C'est pour ça qu'il y a une journée de la diversité culturelle. Et donc, je remercie les panélistes, les artistes qui sont là, même s'ils ne sont pas d'accord souvent les politiques, mais qu'ils acceptent que les politiques puissent réguler les rapports entre eux d'abord, parce que souvent aussi, on voit bien qu'il y a des conflits entre les artistes, souvent sur les œuvres d'art, un peu produit ici, à Abidjan, et puis un autre reprend ça à Abuja là-bas. Il faut qu'il y ait des politiques pour réguler tout ça. Hein, vous voyez, forcément, donc il y a une nécessité de s'entendre sur la question. Pour ce qui est des systèmes d'éducation, je pense que c'est des choix qui sont faits. Et dans tous les cas, le politique a une influence sur la vie artistique dans le pays. Il y a des pays en Afrique où les artistes évoluent rapidement. Il y a d'autres, par contre, où, comme le pays à l'origine n'a pas donné de la place à l'art, ils ont plutôt privilégié d'autres domaines. Les artistes n'ont pas forcément toute la place qu'il faut, ou n'arrivent pas à s'exprimer comme ils le veulent. Donc, ouais, donc c'est ce que je voulais dire, tout en vous encourageant à continuer dans votre champ d'action, dans vos créativités. Les génies sont rares, et quand on en a à côté de nous, on ne peut que s'en féliciter.
Creativity is very critical to educational reform, reform for how we think of fields of employment, and also the dialogue between policymakers who should not be gatekeepers, but gate openers. That's how I understood the argument here. And also the place of the tangible and intangible. Thank you.